LabCoat Agents podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the LabCoat Nation to another webinar. And this one's an interesting one. This is different. I don't think I've ever seen this topic in LabCoats, but I've talked to many a real estate professional who aspires to become an author, to write a book, to tell their story. So we're going to tell you exactly how to do that today, and probably talk a little bit about this guy right here, because the talent, the author, the storyteller is present. You guys know Ryan Garson from obviously the Very Social Broker, but also from Very Social New York, who is a content creation app or platform for Instagram. And we have brought along two very wise and what's the right word here? Experts in the book writing field. We've got Michael here, who is the publisher, and Jeff, who is the copywriter / ghostwriter. And we're going to talk all about that today, how this comes together. Ryan, with that, I'll let you take it away, my friend.
Yeah, definitely. So it's pretty crazy. I'm a real estate agent. I've been in the real estate business for 8 years over here in Manhattan. I have a 10-person team. And like, I've always been a realtor. Like my first couple of years, I came to New York City without really a Rolodex. So I was just like grinding, doing a lot of rentals, started getting into sales. And about 4 years ago, I really started to market myself and really build a brand on social media. And then I started selling real estate on social media, selling millions of dollars of real estate on social media. And then I came up with the great idea. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm onto something. Like, I was working with a social media manager at the time, and we partnered up. We created Very Social, and I wanted to create an agency that could help other realtors like build their brand on social, help them sell, really free up their time so they could sell more real estate and still have their social media on point. So now 2 years later, Very Social has almost 90 clients. We are more than just an Instagram company. We actually are like a full-on agency for real estate agents. We're doing LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, email newsletters, paid ads, but Instagram is definitely our bread and butter. And so now, you know, managing almost 90 realtors, real estate professionals, social media, I can kind of see things on a macro level, like what's working, what's not working. And I'm also a content creator myself. Like I really spend at least once a week, you know, taking photos, creating video content. So Jeff and I have been working together for years. He writes all my newsletters. If you guys have seen my newsletters, there's a ton of thought and effort that go into it. And I actually met him at a BNI, like probably like 5 years ago. And then he started working. We met him at the BNI. He talked about like being a ghostwriter and helping with books. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like, how much does that cost? And then like, I was like, well, you know what? That sounds expensive. Why don't we start with some newsletters? And so then, you know, we did years of newsletters, super consistent, always on point, articulate. And most importantly, he really got my voice. And like, I'm not really the best writer. Like, my brain moves too fast to be a really good writer, but I have really good ideas, and I feel like I can verbalize them. And Jeff is a great writer, so it was a great partnership. And so then, like, Very Social, you know, he saw like the evolution of Very Social, and I was like, you know what, I think I should write a book. And so we got to talking. He's like, okay, you know, what do you want to write it about? What are the topics? Like, who's your target market? Who's your reader? And I really I know a big decision was like, who do I want to reach? Do I want to reach just realtors, or do I want to reach like all of anybody on social media who has a business and wants the brand? But, you know, I really felt the most comfortable really talking to realtors, because that's what I am. That's what I know best. And so we wrote a book together. A lot had to do with the LabCoat webinars, because I was like, oh, look at this webinar that we did on this topic. And we spent probably a good 6 to 8 months really like putting this book together. And it feels amazing. I will just say, like, I get DMs and emails all the time saying, I just read your book. It was so inspirational. I learned so much. Like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to create content. I'm going to work off my pillars. I'm going to do this tip that you said. It's pretty crazy. Like, I just never really thought I could reach so many people. And it's like a lot different when somebody's like talking, like really commits to like reading a book, you know, spending a couple hours, like listening to your thoughts. And it's just, it's a real feel good. It kind of, I like to say it's also like an authority piece, where, you know, we're in a new, like, real estate has been around forever, but like social media marketing for realtors, I feel like is really like a new world. And like, I think writing this book has like put me on the map, not only as somebody who owns an agency and is a content creator, but now as like a published author, that people really come to for advice. And I couldn't have done it with this great team. So Michael, Jeff, you know, you guys were awesome to work with, and I'm here to kind of like let my secrets out and talk about how I actually wrote this book. And I just like I started Very Social to help other agents just be better on social media and really grow their brand and like use social media to get more business. I'll tell you what, writing a book is next level. It takes time, effort, and money, but I think it's an investment in your brand and yourself that could be paid tenfold. So let's get into it. Let's talk about writing a book.
Well, I've got some questions. So before we get started, let's start with personal introductions. So Jeff, Michael, I'll let you guys take it. I'd like you guys to just tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and what you do. And then I will certainly steer this and ask some questions because I'm curious myself. So we'll start with you, Michael. So you were on first. We'll let you go first. Introduce yourself, what you do, what brought you up in the business, and then we'll go over to Jeff.
So my name is Michael Clausen. I have been in publishing for 25 years. I have authored or ghostwritten probably 20 books myself, worked on 70 traditionally published books. So I've got a lot of experience. I've worked with presidential campaigns. I won't tell you who because I don't want to get you all mad at me. But anyway, I've enjoyed it. I started Lumify Media about 7 years ago. I live in Denver, Colorado, Littleton to be specific. And I believe strongly in using books to help establish a platform of credibility for whatever business you're in. I think it's really strong. It gives you instant authority in whatever subject you're talking about, as long as it's a high quality book. So a little bit about me.
Love it. Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff McQuilkin. Thanks for having me. As Ryan mentioned, I'm his copywriter / ghostwriter. We've been working together for several years. And you know, honestly, Ryan's being just a little bit modest about the story behind this book, because I mean, the fact is, and when I tell people about this book after the fact, they're all like, wow, you know, because the fact is he was able to leverage social media to generate $300 million in sales. And that's a story worth telling. So it was actually a lot easier to write the book because it wasn't difficult to find interesting stuff to write about. And so, but I've been a freelance writer for about 12 years. You see with the keyboard behind me, I'm also a composer. In fact, Mike and I know each other from college. We played music together in college. When we got finished with the book, writing the draft, Ryan was asking about publishing, and I just thought Mike would be a good fit, so I introduced them and ended up teaming up to put this book together. So, you know, it's a little bit about me. I've ghostwritten several books. I do a lot of web content on the day-to-day, but I really love helping people tell their stories, and Ryan had an awesome story to tell. So that's how I got involved and why I really just one of my favorite projects that I've done so far.
Love it. Love it. And just to clear the air here, when Ryan says Jeff helped him write this book, he's not talking about me. I didn't do anything. I just showed up here and stand in front of a microphone. We're definitely talking about this, Jeff. I don't know where he's at on your screen. So I want to start with this, Ryan, because I think, again, anybody listening to this knows why they're here. They're not here just out of randomly. They're probably here because they're actually interested in writing a book. So I want to get a little technical on the facets of writing a book, but let's start with the conception of it? Where does it come from? Right. So what was the inspiration? What drives somebody to say, I want to write a book? And you kind of mentioned like what it can do for you, but that's kind of down the road a little bit. Talk about what made you say one day, I got to write a book. And then what kind of led to you deciding what it was you were going to write about that you could say, hey, people will actually gain something from this?
Yeah. I talk to people about social media. I talk to realtors about social media every single day. I hear their pain points. I hear their success stories. I really have become an expert on it. I mean, the 90 clients I manage, like before I get those clients, like I'm really like hearing like what they've done right, what they've done wrong. And I just like, I feel like such an expert in the space, and I've helped so many agents. Like I have so many case studies of like, you know what? I grew my follower count by this much and my GCI increased by this much. Like that's really what I hear, like so many success stories. And I just wanted to tell the story. I personally have a great story on how I've leveraged social media to really grow my brand. New York City is such a competitive market. It's an old school market. We have, buildings that have been around forever that have co-op boards that are super strict. Like, for agents to kind of come out of the gate and like be top producers, it just doesn't happen overnight. And I really feel like once I started to like create the content that I'm creating, I blew up. Like I 5X'd my business last year alone. And that's how it's been. So I felt like that was a story, just talking to realtors, on a day-to-day basis, seeing what's working, what's not working. Cause I love talking about bad social media, talking about like what I'm doing, my strategy behind like my content creation, really like delving into my pillars of content. I just felt like I had something to say. And as a realtor, I didn't have time to write the book myself. I needed a collaboration, and like that's where Jeff came in, and it honestly, I think he pretty much is like, all right, just like what are your chapters? Like give me like what do you want to write about? And then we kind of put a table of contents, and then we kind of just like went from there.
It's interesting. And so before I get to that kind of leads to the next question, I want to ask Jeff or Mike this question, which is, you guys have worked with other authors and other just professionals that decided they wanted to write a book. What have you seen? Like, what is the inspiration? And the reason I'm asking this question is because obviously it's very clear for Ryan. I know if I write a book, I know exactly what it would probably be about. And I know obviously for Ryan, it was pretty obvious, but if I'm just just a random real estate agent, for example, which is our audience, help maybe the listener understand like where they would derive their inspiration for a topic around a book based on your experience with maybe other authors. And I'll let either one of you take it or both of you.
I go. I learned somewhere, it was a great principle that you don't have to be the all told expert on everything in your field to have something to say. You just need to have something meaningful to contribute to the conversation. One person put it like, you just need to be one step ahead of other people. If you are one step further along in the process, you have something to share with people behind you. And so for business owners, real estate agents, things like that, that's a good thing to look for, is what's your specialty? What do you do in what you do that is better than somebody else does? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the best in the nation. It just has to be something that others can learn from. Or the other inspiration would be, if you do have, a personal story to tell. One of my ghostwriting clients, were actually the first half of her book is a memoir. How did she get into her business? And then we'll spend the other half of it discussing her business a little bit. But she wanted to tell her personal story, so we've interwoven that in. Because it's compelling reading, it's inspiring. So those are the two things. What do you have in your own life that, and everybody has a story. Don't sell yourself short. Everybody's got a story to tell. What is it that you have to share that would benefit others, what do you know about your field that others could benefit from? There's the areas that I would look for inspiration if I were writing a book for myself. And it's what most of my clients come to me with, some sort of a seed like that we can help develop. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, and I want to build on what Jeff said. I would also say, who are you trying to reach? Who's your clientele, and where have you found success in working with those people? The most powerful way to communicate your message is through stories. You tell success stories, you give testimonials, and you're going to win people over to your side.
I love that. So, okay, the individual gets to that point where they say, I want to write a book. So somebody who doesn't understand what goes into it, they just assume they're going to sit down with their pen and their paper, and they're going to start writing, or they're going to type it, right? And they're going to start telling a story. But that's really not how most books are written nowadays. And not to say that some don't go out and write their own books, but part of this, Jeff, is where you come into play here. And I imagine that when Ryan came to you, it was more of just an idea, like, I just want to put a bunch of stuff on paper inside of a binded book and help me vomit it out. And I'm guessing you probably did a lot of that with him. And so what is the next step? So Ryan comes to you and says, I want to write a book. I imagine you're going to ask a lot of questions, and you're basically taking the notes to literally articulate what he is verbalizing. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's a pretty fair assessment of it, and I think a lot of people have a misconception about ghostwriting, that it's almost like maybe a very long version of paying someone to write it, do your homework for you. It really isn't. The thoughts in Ryan's book are his. All I did was I took what he said and I fleshed it out, and I had a little bit of advantage writing for him for several years to be familiar with his voice, but that's also part of the job of the ghostwriter, is to learn that person's voice. And so what we generally do with our process, someone comes to us with a topic. I want to write a book about this. Then the next step is usually to schedule a series of interviews that we record. And, we asked, Ryan did present some basic topics he wanted to cover in the book. I just went through in our conversations, okay, talk to me about this. Teach me about this. If I were a real estate agent learning to use social media, what would you tell me? And I just let him talk, and I recorded it. And what that did is, and then I transcribed it, and that gave me not just source material to flesh out his book, but it also helped reinforce his voice, so that every time I go in to write, I have that lingering question in there. How would Ryan say this? What words would he choose that I would use maybe differently? But if I'm writing in his voice, what does that sound like? And so we know we've done a good job when at the end of the project, our client says to us, that sounds like I would have said it if I'd have written it myself. And so that really is the job of a ghostwriter, is to be a collaborator. They're your thoughts, they're your ideas, you're the expert, you're teaching us, and we, in the process, kind of flesh out the verbiage in a way that your reader can understand in a methodical way, and then it's in your voice. So that's the best way I can answer that question.
Jeff, do you even have an Instagram page?
I do have an Instagram page. I don't use it very much.
He knows nothing. Like, he didn't know about social media. He didn't know about Instagram. Like, this was somebody that was so raw. And I'm like, hey, write a book about social media. And like, it just really is my voice. And like the interviews that we had on each chapter, he went through and he was just very diligent. He asked the right questions. I answered the right questions. Like, I don't even think we really, like, the edits were so minor that when he came back to me with that first draft, and it just, like, I feel like the one thing that Jeff did is, like, I think I had a lot of, like, raw thoughts, and, like, he did, like, analogies, or he kind of, made it, like, seem like my thoughts were, like, much more structured, and I think, like, told a story just in a more like I probably, it would probably take me like 10 minutes to say, but he wrote it down in like 2 minutes, and he just made it like much more to the point and elegant. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a book that like, I feel like you can get a lot out of it in a lot of different ways.
Jeff, what was, when it comes to taking what someone is saying, so in this case, Ryan, and then shifting it over into words, you mentioned like you're recording this stuff is, how are you trying? Because, my first thought was, I'm thinking about like sports and media and how the media misconstrues what somebody said. I know this is a totally different concept, but I'm thinking to myself, if I hire a writer, like I want to make sure it is written as though literally it came from my mouth, my pen, right? And so when someone hires somebody like you, I assume that, I mean, are you literally like climbing inside of Ryan as you're writing this to make it sound like he is physically writing it? Is that the whole goal here?
Yeah, it really is. And that sounds a lot more magical. I mean, I've already got you, the way you described that, I had pictures of like doing a seance or something. And it's nothing like that. It really is just paying attention. I have a skill. I've spent a lot of years, and my background has just allowed me to listen to people and then state back to them what they said in my own words to make sure I understand it. And so it's a lot of listening comprehension, and it's a lot of, sometimes it's trial and error. It went very smoothly with Ryan, but the whole reason that there is a ghostwriter and an editing process is sometimes we'll get it wrong. Sometimes we'll get facts wrong. Sometimes we'll say it in a way that the writer's not that comfortable with, and we'll have to go back and rehash some of those points. But the end result is exactly what you said. It is a collaboration, but the idea is to make it so that that person has the benefit of my talents, where they don't have the time or the wherewithal or the understanding of how to put their thoughts into book form. That becomes my job, but it is at the end their thoughts. It is their ideas, just put forth in a way that others can grasp them. But that's my job. My job is to take complex topics and make them simple for the, I do it all the time. So
how long does this process take?
With Ryan's case, about 6 months. It doesn't always take that long. I've written books in as little as 3 months. And it also depends on the length of the book, and the longer the book, the longer it takes, and the more complex thoughts, the longer it takes. But generally 3 to 6 months is a good window, I think.
How much time from the authors, from their bucket, how much time did Ryan have to put into this? And maybe that's a question for Ryan. Because you think 6 months, I'm thinking to myself, well, shit, that's going to cut into my time that I'm closing deals.
It was thousands of emails. It was a lot of work. It wasn't that much work with Jeff. Jeff and I have a really, I would say, I thought I had, Michael, I think the hardest part was the cover.
I agree.
The cover was a whole nightmare. I actually, I had to get me that picture. Jeff was easy. I would say it took time. I mean, it's 12 chapters. I think it was like an hour each interview. I did a lot of research. It probably took me 50 or 60 hours. But I wasn't in a rush with this either. Like I wanted to do it right. Like I didn't really pressure Jeff. I wasn't like, let's get this done. I wanted it to be right. But going over the publishing, so this is the cover, this is the back. D-Rock actually he's a friend, and he was like, I was really kind of going back and forth, and I wanted the cover to be something very special. So I actually hired this artist that is an illustrator, and she made this. If you can see, I post this a lot. And so, I don't know, it just didn't really look like a cover. And I was back and forth between my team, and I couldn't figure it out. It was honestly driving me crazy. I was up at night, thinking what do I do about the cover? And I was like driving everybody crazy about it. And that right there, that took 2 months to do. And that took more edits than than for Jeff for like actually writing it. Like I had something in my head, but it didn't really come out to my illustrator. And so at the last minute, I was like, Michael, put something together. He put something together in like 24 hours and he got it done. But that was probably my most like complex part about the whole book. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, like the illustrator was like, I'm leaving for Europe. I need this done. You need to make a decision like in like 1 hour. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to be pressured into like my cover. Like this is so important. And then I just like X-nayed it. And pretty much this is what I got for it. I got a picture I hang up in my in my office. But my vision with this is like, I wanted it to be like New York and different like Instagram like feelings and like that. This is like all pictures from my Instagram that she actually like took and she put. But D-Rock goes to me and he's like, take that picture, go to like a bookstore and see like how it looks like around other books. And like, it looked nothing like other books. It was just, and I don't know. So I feel like I went with this, which was pretty good. Michael got this done real quick. And yeah, that I feel like that's a good look. But I'll tell you what, you know, once you're a published author, like it was such great content, and it's still great content for me. I did a really great commercial. I did an awesome photo shoot. I got so many people came out of the woodworks and was like, oh my God, like, I'm so like, congratulations on writing the book. You know, past clients, friends, family, high school people I went to, like, you know, I think it's like a real accomplishment. And like, it was just a great way to like reconnect and just people were reaching out all over the place for it. And it's an authority piece. I mean, I go into a listing and I tell people, yeah, I wrote a book on how to sell real estate on social media. Like, and I just drop it.
Yeah.
You know, like
it's nice for your listing presentations, essentially.
Yeah. It's, you know, and you know what, I actually got this idea when I met Jeff at the BNI. I went to one of my real estate attorneys and he had this little book. It was like one of those little mini books. And it was like something like how to sell.
I have it right here.
I
still have it.
Oh yeah.
I still have it.
What's it called? What's the title of it?
It's called The Deal.
The Deal.
An essential guide for real estate transactions in New York City. It's like 25 pages.
So the first deal the first apartment I ever sold, I went to the closing and it was this attorney and he was a great attorney and he gave me the book. And I'm like, I'm going to write a book one day. That's exactly how it started. And then I met Jeff at a BNI and I'm like, I got this book on my first deal. Like, I want to do something. And like 5 years later, I mean, we actually did it, you know, pretty amazing.
That's awesome. So, okay. So you talked about the cover and how that actually was probably more painful than actually writing the book, which is interesting. So Mike, I want to come to you on this and ask you, like, what was your take on that? Was Ryan as big of a pain in the ass as he described himself? And like, what goes into that? So when anybody's writing a book, like, I guess there's more thought that has to go into what's on the cover than just creating one.
Right. Well, you know, I'll say this. I mean, when I heard that Ryan was this big time realtor, and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to be hard to work with. Ryan was great to work with. And I think that's one of the keys to put together a book. The quality that Ryan has is when you have an author who's willing to collaborate, and Jeff was willing to collaborate, and we work together as a team rather than, you know, I have authors who just want to bulldoze their way through it because they think they know how to do it, and they don't listen to us, and we've got experience. So, you know, the problem that we dealt with the artwork, it was beautiful artwork, it just wasn't suitable for a cover. And so he sends me the image, and I said, well, it's too busy. You know, the main piece, and you can see Ryan's book cover in the background. What needs to jump out more than anything else is the title. And everything else, if it distracts from the title, then it's distracting from what you're trying to accomplish with your book. And so Ryan had said, you know, we got this. I'm like, no, it needs to be changed. We did a few iterations, and you know, honestly, you know, his art friend is really talented, but it just takes a different set of experiences and to put together a book cover that actually fits the bill and can sell books. So we collaborated. And the other part that Ryan did, I thought he wanted to get this done in a hurry. And at one point, Ryan calls me and goes, look, I'd rather do this right than do this fast. And that is music to the ears of any publisher or writer. Because, and I'm sure Jeff understands this, every publishing deal is a rush job. And then you can sacrifice quality, but instead Ryan was more interested in quality than in just pushing this thing out. So, we got it done. I felt really good about the book. And Ryan, you were just great to work with. And that isn't always the case with authors. So that made it that much better. And what happens is, even subconsciously, is the people who work on the book want to do a better job because they just like working with you. And so it came together great.
I mean, honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I've never, the publishing game, like I had no clue. So pretty much whatever Michael said, I was like, okay, that works. Like I really just, I think I was just in new territory and new waters. But yeah, I mean, how many sites are we on? Where are we selling the book? Like 30 different sites?
39,000 online retailers around the world. It's available in, actually in Australia, it's available in Europe. People in England can buy it, of course, the US and Canada. So it's being distributed by the Ingram Content Group, which is the world's largest book distribution company.
So let's talk about that. So, at the end of the day, what is the ultimate goal here? And now I really want to kind of get into the publishing piece of this, because again, it's over my head. I don't know anything about it. Ryan just said he didn't know anything about it. I doubt anybody listening knows anything about it. So you get from conceptualization of what you want to write about, you get with the Jeffs of the world and you write it. Then you get with you. We talked about how you come up with a cover and a back cover and all that kind of stuff. But then what's next? And you just mentioned, you've got to get it distributed. But what's the goal here? Is the goal to sell books to make money? Because I've heard there's not a lot of margin potentially for authors. So what is the goal here from your perspective, Michael? And I guess what goes into the whole publishing of a book?
Well, so when Jeff and Ryan were done with their part, it goes into copy editing. We pull in a third person to smooth out the grammar. They format it for the Chicago Manual of Style, which is the style manual in traditional publishing. And then we do the typesetting, where they do the interior formatting of the book. And so it's, like when they give us the finished manuscript, it's still usually 8 to 12 weeks before the book is ready to go, ready for press. So, but in terms of what do you, after, for a business person, you're not going to make a mint on book sales, probably, but to bring in new business, it's a no-brainer. I mean, and it doesn't take, you get, as a realtor, you get one sale can pay for the book, and if you bring in 10 more or 15 more, I mean, it's, and everybody else is handing out business cards and you're handing out a copy of your book.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to look better? I mean, you every time.
Yeah. And I think that's important and I'll get to you, Ryan, here in a second, is that's important. And that's what I wanted to hear, because I knew the answer to the question. It's an investment in your business. It's like buying leads, right? It's like buying marketing. It's buying advertising. That's essentially what you're doing, but in such a unique way that there's so few that do it. Like Ryan said, he walks into a listing presentation and can slap a book. Oh, hey, I brought you something. I wrote a book. Here's what it's about. Oh, guess what? It's about how I'm an expert at selling your home on social media. And it's really kind of,
in other words, the book is not the product. You're the product.
Yeah.
Your business is the product. Your service is the
I
product.
love when people are like, oh, what are you up to? What have you been up to? I'm like, oh, I actually just published a book. It's a conversation piece. It's a content piece. Like, I've created great content around it. I'm on here today because I think that realtors should make this part of their mix. They should have they should have a goal of like writing a book. Everyone's got a different story. They could talk about like selling in Idaho, or like how to sell a co-op, or like how to do mortgage marketing. Like, nobody does it better than you. I think everyone's got some story to tell, but we're busy doing our day-to-day jobs. So like, to be able to have a team that really like can like, work with you. And that's why I started Very Social, is because, again, I'm a busy realtor. Like, I love social media. I know I need to do it, but I don't really have time to really do it to the level that I want it on my own, because I'm busy selling real estate. You know, I feel like, you know, I invest in my social media. You know, investing in like writing a book is like next level marketing tool. It really is.
At what point, and anybody can answer this question, at what point is the real estate professional ready to write a book? Like, obviously it's not day one. I just got into real estate. Now I'm going to write a book on selling real estate. Is it once you've established yourself as a top producer? Is it once you've established yourself that you have some sort of unique value proposition? When is the time, in your guys' professional opinions, that someone should now take that leap? Also keeping in mind that if you're knee deep in production and you haven't scaled a team yet, you may not have the time for this. So also the timing of when you write a book. How would you guys answer that question?
Well, I think the unique value proposition, if you have a new approach into the market or a new way to deal with a market issue, I think that's the time to do it. If you wait, I mean, if you wait until you're on top of the market, I mean, you may never write the book. So when you have an insight, a different approach than anybody else, and then in that book, you're establishing your credibility, but you're also describing why you are the right person to do it. And then that becomes your vehicle for, picking up business.
Anyone else want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I think Michael said it best. You have to have a certain edge or something that's like unique about you. And I think like really my like differentiator is social media marketing, content creation, and the fact that I have an agency and I'm an agent. Like, I think I had a real story to tell. And I also give a lot of advice on like how to make your social media better. But I think that I think everyone's got their own story. Everyone, if you've been in this business and you're successful, like, you have a story to tell. And it doesn't have to be about real estate. It could just be about, what your passions are. Being a published author is like, if you're in a league of your own. It's something to really be proud about. It's a great way to create content. It's not for everybody, but it's for the top. It's for the winners in this industry. Like, if you are writing a big book, if you've written a book and there's not many people that are doing it, like, you're a winner. Like, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Well, even the competition out there is very little. I mean, how many books written by real estate agents are out there? Hardly any.
I don't know the answer to that question. So you just told us. That's good. I didn't know that.
One thing to Ryan's point is, it said before, we actually started this conversation 5 years ago, and he thought, at the end of that conversation, Ryan's feeling was, this is a great idea. Let's table it and see what happens. And, when he finally came to me with, this was really before he really blew up on social media. And then when he came to me with this topic, I'm like, that's it, man. You've got to write about this book. You have to do this. So, sometimes it's a matter of going through your journey until you feel confident with what you have to say. That makes a huge difference. It would have been a much different book had we started 5 years ago. So, just letting it simmer and finding that story that you have is kind of a good point. It may take years, but it could take weeks or months. If something's, burning in your gut, you've got something to say, then, let's have a conversation about that.
You just don't want to say what everybody else is saying, because then there's no reason to write the book. They can go find it somewhere else. But if you can say something unique, then it's time.
Or
is
if
probably,
you can say it in a unique way.
Right.
If you can say it in a unique way, add something to the conversation other people aren't adding to it. Exactly.
So if somebody isn't sure, I guess that is part of the next step, is the discovery process, which, Michael, I saw that you shared your link in the chat. Check that out for his calendar link, which is for discovery, right? So I guess that's a part of it. So if you just have this little inkling of maybe I want to write a book, I guess that's a part of it, right? Is a conversation of you saying, can I pull something out that is unique? I assume you're not just going to say, you want to write a book? Basically, you have a pulse, fine, we'll write a book. It's more of, do you actually have something of value that we should write a book about?
Right.
Yeah, and we can have those preliminary conversations. If someone's got an interest, then we'll probe and find out, is there a niche? What would be an interesting thing to write about? So, don't be afraid to reach out to writers and publishers if you have an interest in doing it, but you don't really know what to say, because we can also kind of help just, finding that place. We can help you figure out your story in some respects. So I can't do that for everybody, but it's always worth having the conversation.
Right.
Love that. I love that.
What you don't want to do is just get started and you write this whole book or you get all these notes out and Jeff goes, you know what, this has already been written. I mean, you're better off earlier in the process rather than later, so that you don't go off on a tangent where everybody else has already gone.
Yeah. It's also validation why you need to have guys like you guys in their corner, and don't just go get out that pen and paper and spend all this time writing a book. And then turns out nobody's going to want to publish it because it's already been told. Right. So
Right.
I guess that's a big part of the process as well.
Right.
It's interesting. Now, Jeff, we've heard the word story that's been said multiple times. The last thing I want to ask about that is, and I've heard people say this, that, when I read, I can't get into a book unless there's a story behind it. It just bores me. Right. And what we're talking about today is educational. Ryan teaching people how to grow their business through social media. That's tactical. That's technical. That's educational. How do you make that interesting?
Well, we started with his story. We spent the first 2 chapters telling him how he got to be the guy that you need to talk to about social media, because and that really is in a lot of senses the case, because you spend the first part of the book explaining to people why they need to read the book. The old thing is, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And but part of that process is qualifying yourself. What will you learn in this book? What's the promise of the book? And why is it that, you should read it from me? And we covered that in the introduction, the first couple chapters, so that by that time, everybody, I think, is engaged in the story enough to go, okay, this is what happened to him. These were the results. Now let's dive in and find out how he did it. He's going to share with me what he did. And so that's going to be the process with any book written by a real estate agent or any other type of working professional that's explaining a niche of any kind. We're going to qualify you. We're going to go back and we're going to find out your story, and we're going to tell your story, because that is what grabs people. We live by story. So
Love it.
That answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into parting thoughts, I've got a question for each of you. I'm going to start with you, Jeff. You mentioned this was one of your favorite books that you've ghostwritten. What was your second favorite?
Honestly, the one I'm working on right now that I just made mention of, which I can't really give many details, I really enjoy helping because the lady has a very interesting backstory. And she's a coach, and I am a natural encourager. So I like writing for coaches and people like that, because it's right in my personal thing. It spurs my creativity. But probably my favorite book before Ryan's was the first book that I wrote, and it was Ghost wrote, and it was a book about how to ditch college and get your dream job.
Cool.
And it was just written from the standpoint of talking about the concept of mentoring in the professional world.
Yeah.
And kind of parsing out colleges, what's good about them, what's not working about them anymore, and the alternate pathways if you don't feel like you can afford or get into college, but you have a passion. How do you go about it? And there was educators that Ghost wrote the book, a pair of educators that came to me with it, and I they really left me to myself to write it. I had, again, similar to Ryan, I'd actually been writing for them for a few years, so I knew what they kind of wanted, but I got a real kick out of writing that book. So
that's awesome. Michael, what is your favorite industry to work with when it comes to publishing? Like who tends to come out of the woodworks more often to write books? Is there a certain industry that you work with the most?
We work with a lot of individuals who have a story to tell. We work with different business people. I mean, it's really been scattered all the way across. We did a book for a guy who wrote a book on reverse mortgages. and we released that this last year. But we've done a variety of books, and that's what we try to do. Our staff averages 20 years in traditional publishing, and so we know how to work with authors and take whatever their dream is and make it a reality. But real estate is great. I mean, like, my favorite business book was working with Ryan by far.
What's
I don't know if I believe these guys right now.
I'm gonna go ahead and let them fluff you, because that's you wrote them checks, so naturally that should happen. But I'm gonna believe them. Michael, one more question. Let's just say somebody that listened to this today came to you and said, Michael, what do you think I should write about that relates to real estate? So from your outside real estate perspective, what would be that advice?
How to work with, I just bought a house in another city in Nashville. And my experience working with the mortgage people was horrible. I mean, how do you work with mortgage people? I mean, and because the real estate agent can give you a lot of good advice, but it was such a horrific experience that I got some PTSD out of that. But that would be what comes to mind right off the bat.
I love it. Well, it just opened the door for me, so I appreciate that. I like that. Ryan, you just you mentioned how much you love this process and how it's really helped elevate you, which tells me that you're probably going to write a second book. If you were going to write a second book, what are you going to write that book about?
You know what? I haven't talked to them, but I already know exactly what I want to write my second book about. And I hope nobody steals my idea. It's because it's a good one. I have a 2.5-year-old, and every night I read her books. It's like our time together. I love it. And I read, like, LeBron James has a book. Dwayne Wade has a book. My favorite book right now is Sparkleella by Channing Tatum, the actor, Channing Tatum.
Yeah.
So I want to write a children's book about real estate, about the home, about the process, about the story, have some really, cute little characters. Maybe I make it like geared towards the realtor, like where a realtor wants to is proud about, realtors are really proud about what we do. We're passionate about our job. So I don't know, guys, what do you think? Could you work with me on a children's book?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
All right, Jeff, what do you think? Is that
You know what I was thinking? You should direct it.
You have a young kid, your same age.
I do. She's 3. I would, and yeah. So you and I obviously have a lot of parallels. But what I would suggest is you write it to where it's almost like something that a realtor would want to use as a gift to give to their families.
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking.
I work with so many families too. So yeah, guys, I feel like it was in the bag. I've had this idea for a while, but
It's an awesome idea.
We might have to get on it now after this.
It's an awesome idea.
I'm already on Michael's calendar to discuss it. So it's, I'm sorry, dude.
I don't care.
Fellas,
These guys, they like me. I'm the best client.
I definitely would not steal your idea. So I want to give you guys all a chance to leave some parting thoughts. Anything you guys want to leave with the audience?
I've got something. All too often I see people trying to do it all on their own. They get their nephew who was an art major in college to design the cover. They want to write it on their own. They don't need an editor, and they release a book, and it just undermines their credibility. And people and the author feels good about it, but everybody who reads it goes, ouch, because it just doesn't evoke authority on behalf of the person who wrote it. So, the best-selling authors in the world all had a team of people helping them produce the book. And if they need a team of people, everybody needs a team of people.
Yeah.
I would echo what Mike said, but also something that Ryan has been sitting with me ever since he said it, that I didn't want it to escape. So I appreciate you doing this. When he said, I didn't know anything about writing a book, I didn't know anything about publishing. And there's 2 things that come to that. First of all, you don't have to be afraid of what you don't know. Just get the right team. And the second point is, one of the reasons that it made Ryan so easy to work with was that he trusted the team that he gathered.
Yep.
That he allowed us to do our jobs. He gave us the grace and the space to do our jobs. And then we were able to produce for him because he he wasn't afraid to surround himself with people that had the talents and the skills that he lacked. So it's actually one of the best ways to approach writing a book, especially if you never have before, is get a good team behind you and then let them do their jobs well. And in the end, you're going to get something that really works for you, and helps you get more clients and build your authority, like Mike said.
Ryan, take us home.
I would say it's the same reason why I started Very Social. You know, I'm busy as a realtor, and I wanted to delegate my social media. And you know, I created a whole. Not only did I elevate my social media doing that, I created a whole business off that idea. You know, working with a really good team, a publisher, a ghostwriter, I think is super important. Somebody that really gets your voice. You know, Jeff is like critical to my business. Like my email marketing is so important to what I do, and he's so on point. Like he pings me, you know, a couple days before the first, hey, what's going on? What kind of ideas do you have? He does the research. So, you know, writing a book, I think is such a great marketing tool. It's an authority piece. It's a real feel good. I mean, I can't tell you, there's not a better feeling when someone reaches out to me out of the blue and says, hey, thank you so much for your book. Like, I really got a lot out of it. I'm going to like try this, or I'm going to do that. So, you know, it's a little, you know, like Jeff said, LabCoats does webinars on everything you can think of, but they've never done one on actually writing a book, because I think it's like for the best of the best. And if you want to be a top producer, if you want to really like invest in your brand, like writing a book, I think will take your business to the next level. And, you know, the key to a good book is having a good team.
I love it. Amazon, probably in 130 or 39,000 other places you can find this guy, right? Go
Right.
Check it out. Go get yourself a copy. And if you want to connect with Michael, he put his calendar link, so you can kind of have a discovery call. You know, if you qualify to write a book, if he thinks you're worthy of writing a book, I'm getting on his calendar because I do want to talk about this. And honestly, Jeff, even more so than writing a book, I think, Ryan, what you said more so is in every realtor's wheelhouse is having a newsletter, having an email newsletter. You know, that's like critical. If you don't have one in your business and you don't know where to start, you don't feel like you have the time, the guy's right here. His email is in the chat, and we'll put all this stuff in the caption or the notes. So LabCoat team, make sure you put all of the links from this into the chat so they can connect with these guys. You got to have it. And then lastly, don't forget where Ryan comes from. If you want to grow your Instagram, go to verysocialnyc.com. You get 1 month free on a 4-month contract to have them help you grow your Instagram presence.
Also, if you shoot me a DM, I'll mail you a signed copy of the book too.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you, guys. It was great to connect with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
LabCoatAgents Podcast.